So we mentioned that it wasn't clear to anybody how to found a science of psychology. The people had different goals in mind, explaining behavior, concentrating on experience or subjectivity. We said that they tried all kinds of things, wacky experiments, thinking things out from the armchair. We've met psychophysics. And we mentioned briefly that introspection was one avenue explored. Introspection is basically looking within, asking yourself, why did I do such and such a thing? Or how did I arrive at that conclusion? Or how connected do I currently feel to the universe? I hope you can see that this is not going to be easy. Now, freewheeling introspection of the kind I just did goes nowhere. People have no idea why they do things. They're lousy at describing what you might call inner states, despite their confidence sometimes in so reporting. And so attempts were made, primarily in Germany, to standardize a way of guiding the introspective questioning, turning it into something of a standardized and rigorous method. And limited success was had with this. In some laboratories, it was found that if you repeatedly set people particular tasks, that their introspective reports would be well aligned and would seem to give insight into underlying thinking processes. But it was an illusion. It turns out that if you change the experimenter, all the rigor fell away. So as long as the same person was doing the same kind of questioning, they get the same kind of answer. But we can't have a scientific instrument that depends on the person, the inquirer, the investigator, being the instrument. So these results didn't replicate. You change the laboratory, you change the personnel, and all the results fall apart. Introspection got perhaps an unduly bad name. In one sense, we never do without introspection in our business, because if I tried to sell you a story of the mind or of experience or of the reason why you do things, and it's completely at variance with your own understanding of yourself. If I tell you the mind is actually a lot of little purple fish, you go, no, you don't know what you're talking about. So to that extent, introspection still serves as a backdrop, because we all need to convince ourselves of the sanity of the stories we're telling. But partly as a backlash against such freewheeling introspectionism, a movement arose primarily in the Anglo-American sphere, known as behaviorism. And this is now at the start of the 20th century, and it's going to dominate Anglo-American psychology for half a century, for 50 years or so. And then it's going to move elsewhere, and where it moves to is interesting as well. Behaviorism tried to be very scientific, big boy scientific. All this stuff about unobservable mental states, stuff we can't see, get rid of that. So it was trying to eliminate the subjective, which is our primary concern, relying only on the objective. And as we'll see throughout this module, the distinction between subjective and objective is not simple, and we can't make this simplistic distinction. Nonetheless, it was tried. And behaviorism came in many forms. We're going to look at two here in lectures, Skinner now, Pavlov in the next video, and then in class we'll also look at John Watson. So they illustrate great variety in the kinds of behaviorism that arose. Basically what they all have in common is they're trying to get rid of that problematic notion of mind and see what we can do without appealing to it. So in this sense, behaviorism has totally abandoned one of the goals of psychology, which is to elucidate experience. Completely abandoned it to an exclusive focus on what we call behavior. And we've noted before that behavior is not simply objective. Behavior, to describe something as a behavior, is to include your own parsing in terms of goals of what you're observing. Behaviorists were not clear on this. So the most famous of these is B.F. Skinner. And he worked mainly with animals, birds, maybe rats, I'm not sure. And he introduced a concept known as operant conditioning. And we better say a word about what conditioning means if we're speaking behaviorist talk. Behaviorists have narrowed their focus exclusively to behavior, and they want to know where behaviors come from, and how they get extinguished or go away. You ever try and get rid of a bad habit, for example? And how they can be modified. So the modification of behavior, or the induction of a new behavior, is conditioning. And it's going to be a common focus, but different behaviors are going to work this notion out differently. In Skinner's case, his form of conditioning is very simple. It's carrot and stick. He understands behavior to be modified as a result of its consequences. So if you touch something hot and you burn yourself, I'm not going to do that again. If you do something nice and you get a candy as a result, yay, I'll probably do that again. So very, very simple. And notice here, behaviorists almost exclusively worked with animals, not with humans, which is a peculiar place to base your psychology in, especially if you're trying to address people who are asking into the human experience, or human souls even. The use of animals is very, very important. In class we'll discuss John Watson, and we'll see how thoroughly inhuman such methods become when they are applied to humans, or can become. Back to Skinner. So one thing he did was he kept a lot of pigeons, and we're going to just look at how operant conditioning worked for his pigeons. He kept them isolated in boxes, so one pigeon per box. These boxes became known as Skinner boxes. And let's put on our critical hats right here and think a pigeon in a box is not a normal pigeon. A pigeon in a box is something kind of odd to study. Pigeons don't normally come in boxes. If the box greatly affects the pigeon, then what we're studying is a pigeon-box combination, not a pigeon, right? Now these pigeons in boxes were kept at about 2/3 of their normal bodily weight. So they're starving. So that means they're very motivated. And food is extremely salient to them. And they had a feeding mechanism in which food pellets would arrive randomly. The food pellets are arriving at random times. There is no way of predicting when the next food pellet will arise. That's something the experimenter can do. And what Skinner found was that the birds all developed strange behaviors. We would call it institutionalization. I don't know if you've ever seen an animal in the zoo that's kept under very poor circumstances, especially like a large animal like a polar bear. Or people in psychiatric institutions also develop things like rocking behaviors, or turning around in circles, or self-destructive behaviors. The pigeons displayed a wide range of behaviors, and Skinner's view was that they were predicting the behavior that seemed to them to cause food to appear. Remember, the food is appearing randomly, there is no cause. So these became known in the literature as the superstitious pigeons. So here you've got some descriptions. One bird was conditioned to turn counterclockwise around the cage, making 2 or 3 turns between reinforcements. Another thrust its head into one of the corners of the cage. A third one developed a tossing response. 2 birds developed a pendulum motion of the head and body. Weird. Totally unconnected to the feeding schedule. What's going on here? Well, one way to look at this is these are damaged birds held in weird pathological circumstances, and one shouldn't read too much into it. Another way is to hallucinate. Let's suggest the birds are perfect creatures of pure reason like we are, and they've got little thinking minds like we do. And let's assume they're trying to figure out how to get food. And they're no cleverer than your average gambler in Vegas. So food arrives, the bird says, what was I doing to make that happen? Oh, I was turning around. Oh, I better turn around again. And so you turn around and it doesn't work. And you turn around and it doesn't work. But like the gambler in Vegas, if you keep turning around, sooner or later a food pellet will arrive and you'll go, gotcha, I made that happen. Now that's not what's happening inside birds. They're not people. They're not reasoning like this. But you can see how it's easy to project your ideas of what a rational being would do, even onto pigeons. Now, there are many approaches to behaviorism, and Skinner's approach with his operant conditioning is very important, possibly the most important of these behaviorist approaches today. And one thing that's notable about Skinner is his recognition of the importance of the context in which the animal finds itself. So the animal is not understood as just a pigeon. It's a pigeon kept starving in a box. and fed at random intervals. And all those are important. You can't understand the behavior without understanding the context. That's very important. It's something that we won't find in Pavlov, for example, the next behaviorist we're going to talk about. And in contemporary cognitive science, realizing that context is super important. That's something we have learnt the hard way. Now, Skinner's operant conditioning considered punishments and rewards. Over the years, people got really, really good at this. And they learned a lot from animal trainers who had known about this themselves. And they found, for example, that punishment is pretty useless, whereas reward is a great way of shaping behavior. And when behaviorism went out of fashion in the 50s and 60s, as we'll see, the behaviorists didn't stop their work. They moved into marketing and advertising. They now design your supermarkets, and they administer gentle behavioral nudges, feel-good little nudges that you don't even notice. So behaviorists are very effective. Operant conditioning is very effective at shaping behavior. I'm not sure it tells us anything at all about psychology, but I do know you can make pots of money with it. And that's pretty much where Skinnerian behaviorism has gone in the meantime. So in the next video we'll look at Ivan Pavlov, and there we'll encounter the very important notions of stimulus and response.